Welcome back to America 2 Video 3B of the America 2 video series. My name is John Shar, and I'll again be your host for this video in the series. In this video, we'll be examining the connections to 27 different symptoms of overpopulation that are, in some combination, harming more than 160 million of America's citizens today and every day. Restate the first problem: unsustainable population growth worldwide, and population-related problems in some countries spilling over become overpopulation-related problems in other countries. Symptom number 1, unemployment. Beginning around 1975, and continued through about 2005, the government assisted commercial interests in moving 20 million plus manufacturing jobs out of America to other countries where they didn't have to pay taxes of any kind, and also didn't have to pay employee benefits like Social Security, Medicare, workers' compensation, health insurance, dental insurance, life insurance, or other benefits like paid vacations, annual bonuses, annual raises, time off for births or family emergencies, no paid holidays, no 401k matching funds, and so on. Also, when, over the same 30-year period of time, those 20 million jobs left about 10 million more jobs relating to businesses that supported the manufacturers here in America also dried up, like raw material suppliers, tool makers, prototype builders, plating businesses, powder coating businesses, die makers, mold makers, packaging suppliers, machine shops, sheet metal shops, injection molders, building materials, building maintenance businesses, fleet maintenance businesses, and so on. And as the combined manufacturing and manufacturing support jobs went away, another almost 10 million jobs in the retail, wholesale, and transport areas also dried up here in America because the number of customers they used to have shrunk with every job lost in the manufacturing and manufacturing support areas. Then in 2008, the government overbuilt, overfinanced housing market fell apart completely, costing 7 million more construction workers their jobs here in America and almost 1 million families their homes. The great majority of these jobs were never brought back online in what might even loosely be considered an equivalent way. Bottom line, America lost 30% of its entire workforce over a 30-year period of time, and we've never even come close to getting it back. So America has, in addition to the unemployment figures, the government says we have almost 45 million more unemployed, underemployed citizens needing good jobs that aren't going to get offered to anyone anytime soon, no matter what their skill level. Over the last 40 years' time, about a third of the lost jobs were replaced by technology. So about 15 million of those jobs are now gone for good. But that still leaves 45 million jobs to be made up. And now 20 million of those 45 million jobs are mostly being done by workers in other countries, with which we have fair trade agreements that say, in effect, we won't try to bring them back. Adding to the complexity level of the existing supply and demand imbalance, the government has for 45 years allowed approximately 2 million people to immigrate in from other countries each year, which has added approximately 90 million to the people needing jobs in America. Therefore is currently a built-in permanent distortion in the supply-demand relationship relating to unemployment says we will, unless things change significantly in the future, always be 40 million or more jobs behind in the full employment picture. Over a 30-year period, government-supported job losses totaled 47 million high-paying jobs, while at the same time we're inviting almost 90 million people from other countries to take up residence in America. The combined 137 million people needing jobs imbalance in the supply-demand equation has made the task of providing meaningful paying jobs to everyone who needs one nearly impossible. And finally, the government decided not to enforce the anti-monopoly laws anymore and has been for at least the last 30 years' time endorsing mergers between already gigantic companies when the mergers are solely to increase already significant profit levels for the merging companies without regard to the impact on the lost jobs that inevitably follow the mergers. The primary cause of unemployment is not just that there are too few good-paying jobs in America, but because of government actions resulting in benefiting the few at the expense of the many, there are now too many people for the number of good jobs that remain in America. America now has insufficient means of sustaining its population through work alone. And America, like all other countries that have gone down this road before us, is now suffering from government-induced overpopulation, and America has now exceeded its carrying capacity for citizens as a country. So long as America can't provide meaningful paying jobs to its worker population, America will need to find other ways to keep sustenance at a level consistent with keeping the people from overthrowing the government in order to try and make things better. And that's what all those entitlement programs are there for. The higher the level of overpopulation, and the more we exceed the country's carrying capacity, the greater will be the number of entitlement programs implemented by the government until the money runs out. Symptom number 2, underemployment. Underemployment springs from losses in employment when there are not enough jobs with comparable pay available to absorb the unemployed workers, and the displaced workers have to accept jobs that don't pay what their prior better jobs paid and have to adjust their standard of living downward to match the lower amounts of income coming in. The losses in employment, in turn, were precipitated by population growing faster than good jobs could be made available to those needing them. When the almost 20 million direct manufacturing jobs were given to other countries with our country's approval, followed by another almost 27 million lost jobs in related industries here in America, approximately 25% of the total ended up taking whatever jobs they could get, at whatever those jobs paid, just to stay alive. And that 25% was divided up between about 12% who never found another job that paid more than it cost to keep the job, and 13% who ended up taking jobs that were beneath their skill, educational, and experience levels. 25% of 47 million is 11,750,000 underemployed or unemployed workers, in addition to whatever the government says are unemployed. And those numbers don't include whatever percent of approximately 90 million immigrants that have come into the country needing jobs who can't find a meaningful paying jobs, most of which are not counted by the government. Displaced manufacturing workers could often not find other good paying manufacturing jobs and had to settle for jobs, sometimes more than one, in the service sector, which paid a fraction of what they used to earn in the manufacturing sector. And benefits were also reduced proportionally, or in some instances, like for minimum wage workers, typically not available at all. Combined with these statistics, our government has been allowing approximately 2 million immigrants each year to enter our country, mostly illegally, for the past 45 years, adding another 90 million, mostly low-wage workers, to the workforce that compete with legal citizens for whatever jobs are available. The immigrants, legal or illegal, mostly just glad to be here. They work hard, they do good work, they live by the rules, and often accept less in pay than some natural-born citizens are willing to accept, which can sometimes cause conflicts between citizens and the immigrants. This was also the case when many of our ancestors immigrated here from other parts of the world 2 to 3 centuries back. But to put things in perspective, at that point in time, America had less than 5% of its present population, so an increase of 90 million never had to be taken into consideration. Times have changed. The added immigrant population does cause, hopefully, a semi-permanent imbalance in the supply and demand calculations, which makes it increasingly difficult to provide all willing and able worker citizens with the kind of jobs that will support a family, like the jobs we mostly used to have in America 60 to 70 years ago. And of course, many of the jobs, about 15 million, that the immigrants and others used to fill are now gone forever due to technology, which creates additional stress in the unemployment and underemployment picture. Symptom number 3, persistent budget deficits. To state the obvious, budget deficits occur when the government fails to bring in enough in taxes to cover the country's expenses. Between 1975 and 2005, the government aided commercial interests in moving their manufacturing businesses out of America, eliminating in excess of 40 million manufacturing and manufacturing support-related jobs in the process. Concurrent with helping the manufacturing companies move out of America, the government looked the other way and allowed approximately 90 million people to immigrate into America, mostly by way of Mexico. And America has been suffering budget deficits ever since. The combined number of unemployed people due to just these two, there were more reasons, 130 million people, would have raised our GDP in all probability by more than $50 trillion had there been meaningful paying jobs available to employ them all. But there weren't anywhere near that many jobs created. And America has been suffering extremely high budget deficits ever since. The deficits were and are 100% the result of the government helping the commercial interests move their manufacturing operations to other countries, and the resulting job losses of more than 30% of the country's tax-paying workforce and overall tax base for the country. The difference we now bring in through taxes and what we now have to pay out in government expenses every year is almost exactly equal to what the number of good jobs that the government destroyed would have paid into the Treasury in taxes if those jobs were still here in America. On the split screen now, I'm displaying a spreadsheet that shows the GDP and debt as it was in 1950 and what it is in 2024. Since 1950, our GDP has grown to be 54 times as big as it was in 1950. Our national debt has grown to be 121 times as big as it was in 1950. Debt has grown 2.24 times as fast as the overall economy has grown. And the difference between our economic growth, the GDP, and our national debt represents the deficit total for America for those years. Which wouldn't be so terrible except for the fact that all of the GDP growth was apparently paid for by way of monetary inflation. In point of fact, growth in debt is equaled 30.913 trillion since 1950, while our GDP has grown 29.197 trillion since 1950, 6.4% less than the debt grew. And it was all paid for with inflation-generated dollars. The good news is that America's GDP is still functioning after a fashion, precariously built on a foundation of loose and shifting sand. The bad news is that it looks like 100% of our GDP growth was also paid for with monetary inflation. And if so, our national economy has not grown in the last 73 years, not even $1. Our economy is now smaller than it was in 1950, with inflation factored in, or taken out, if you prefer. Our population has more than doubled since 1950, and our economy has actually gone backwards when inflation is taken into account. We are now trying to pay annual expenses for 130 million more, mostly unemployed or underemployed people than we even had in 1950, with less money than we were bringing in inflation-adjusted dollars in 1950. The difference is the annual and overall spending deficit, all paid for in inflated and devalued dollars. America's population has exceeded its ability to provide meaningful paying jobs for all of its people, and America now has exceeded its sustenance-based carrying capacity as a country. Symptom number 4. High taxation levels and taxes on everything. Income taxes have not been sufficient to pay our country's bills in any year since 1957. That's 67 years, 68 years now. The tax laws change pretty much every year because politicians have to make promises to the citizens that will help them get elected. Whether the promises are kept or not. At the same time, the politicians don't want to increase taxes enough to pay the nation's bills for fear the citizens might stage an armed revolt and almost certainly would not elect them anymore. Facts. More than half of the citizens receiving income in America don't have to pay income taxes legally. Those living below the poverty level, about 21% according to government estimates, pay no non-refundable taxes at the federal level. Many of these also get an underemployed bonus, averaging $5,000 paid to them each year in the form of an unearned income tax rebate. 12% of the total worker base pay no income taxes because they are long-term unemployed but not acknowledged as such by their government. 3. Retired citizens on Social Security who make less than $32,000 in addition to Social Security, which is somewhere between 20 million and 30 million retired citizens, pay no federal income taxes on their Social Security income. That represents about 18% of the income receiving population. 4. Corporations pay no federal taxes of any kind ever. The taxes that corporations remit to the government are actually first collected up front from their customers, hidden in the prices they charge for their goods and services, and then later sent into the government in exchange for the government agreeing to allow them to stay in business for another year. Sort of like the Sicilian Don in the first Godfather movie. Just let me wet my beak a little. Nonprofit organizations, anybody can be one, pay no taxes. The very wealthy pay next to no taxes. Based on tax regulations they paid our politicians to put in place for them that exempts most of their income from federal taxation. The super rich are about 1% of the population. Many of the most wealthy also have some income funneled to tax havens offshore in countries who don't share income-related information with our IRS. Those who do pay taxes typically remit less than 4% of their total income in the form of taxes to the government every year, which is about half of what the average worker who does pay taxes pays in income taxes. And last but not least, our public servants in Congress and the administration and the courts, who are allowed to deduct all their work-related expenses like house or condo rents, personal travel, entertaining, and so on, before paying their taxes. And that leaves just the working poor and the still employed shrinking middle class to pay in enough to cover all of the nation's bills every year. A little less than half the total of income receiving citizens overall, including a very small number of the really wealthy ones. The government sees themselves as being between a rock and a hard place when it comes to collecting enough income taxes from the citizens to pay all the nation's bills. And the way they attempt to overcome the fact that more than half of the citizens don't legally have to pay anything at all in income taxes is threefold. They tax the middle class and the working poor as much as possible in the way of direct taxes on income, short of causing a tax revolt. And 2, They tax the living bejesus out of everything else. Excise taxes, Medicare taxes, Social Security taxes, unemployment income, disability income, tax refund, state, county, and municipal property taxes, gas taxes, energy taxes of all kinds, taxes on telephone bills, use taxes if you visit a national park, use fees for companies that out of mine, grow livestock or harvest lumber that actually belongs to the citizens, licenses of several kinds, aircraft licenses, boat licenses used in coastal waters, patent fees, trademark fees, fees for carrying and disposing of hazardous waste, overload fees for transporting heavy cargoes, fees for topographical maps, fees for visiting a national monument, aviation fuel taxes, air tax, air travel taxes, import, export related fees, duties, filing fees for permits of various kinds, high taxes on alcoholic drinks, high taxes on tobacco products, toll roads, and so forth, all of which are, when stripped of the euphemisms, forms of income taxation, because a rose by any name would smell the same. All of which are paid by individual citizens only in the end. And 3, they borrow the remaining shortfall. So after all of that, they still don't bring in enough to pay the nation's bills. That's what happens when you first destroy almost a third of your total existing employed tax base to appease the commercial interests, and at the same time bring in 90 million plus more people that need to have jobs that mostly don't pay taxes because they're paid too little to qualify for taxation, resulting in poverty-level incomes, and at the same time attempt to financially take care of those that are too sick, too young, uneducated, disabled, too old to hold down a meaningful paying job, and literally can't contribute towards building the nation's economy. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for viewing and listening, and thanks for caring about our country, America, and wanting to make America and us all that we can be together. Be well.